Hi, my name is Sharon from Tiny Trends LA. Today, I'll be showing you how to take a men's dress shirt and turning it into a tiny little skirt. So, let's get started. So let's go over everything I'll be using to make this skirt. 1 men's dress shirt, washed and pressed. 1.5 inch soft waistband elastic, pinking shears, and my sewing machine. I've included links to all of these in the description below. Let's start cutting. So before I start cutting, I just want to point out I am working with my husband's shirt, and it just so happens to be a healthy size large, giving me just a little more fabric to work with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be taking my straight pin, and I'm going to be making sure that my shirt is laying nice and flat. Now, if you happen to be working with a shirt that has a dart, whether in the front or the back, make sure that you release those darts before you start cutting. And after you release them, make sure to press them so that there's no bunching up in the back where the dart used to be. Okay, so the first measurement I'm going to do is going to be my side skirt measurement, and I'm actually working with a size 2T for this entire project. So I'm going to be measuring out 10 inches on the side. I'm using my chalk. I'm going to go ahead and mark it. And since I'm working with the plaid, it's going to be very easy to use my plaid line as my guide when I'm cutting. So I'm going to repeat that measurement on this side. Now taking my pinking shears, I'm going to go ahead and just follow that plaid line and cut all the way straight through. Now the pinking shears are going to allow us to cut a really cool pattern out, but not only that, it's going to help prevent fraying once we start to actually sew this and put everything together. Okay, so you should now have something that looks like this. The next step is going to be pockets. Now pockets are totally optional if you would like to use them. Since I have a lot of fabric on this shirt, I'm going to go ahead and use pockets. So I'm going to be using a basic rectangle shape, and the measurement on this pocket is actually 5.5 across, 7 inches down, and the hem on this is going to be a 1 inch turned down twice. So I'm actually going to be cutting my pocket on the bias just to break up my pattern on the skirt. So pinning it down, I'm going to go ahead and cut it all around. So now that I have my pockets cut out, I'm actually going to take my iron and I'm going to be pressing my hem down just so that it's ready when the time comes for sewing. So these were actually laying face to face. So I'm going to take my tape, and on the face I'm going to be marking a little dot at the 1 inch mark and the 2 inch mark. This will be my guide when I'm folding them down and pressing. Pressing on the opposite side of your face. Go ahead and press those down. Should actually move this all out of the way first. It's going to be 1, this is going to be 2. So now that my pockets are ready, we're going to put them aside for sewing. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be cutting out my elastic. So the final measurement all around of my skirt is going to be 20 inches. That's the waist measurement I'll be using. So in order to figure out how much stretch our elastic actually has, we're going to measure it up. So I'm going to take about 2 inches, holding it down with my nail and my measuring tape. I'm going to pull and I'm going to see how much it actually stretches. So it's only stretching about 1 inch, meaning that when the person puts the garment on, it's only going to be stretching 1 inch more. So let's say your elastic ends up measuring 2 inches bigger when you pull it, you'll be cutting 2 inches smaller on your final measurement. So I need a total of 20 and my elastic's only stretching an extra inch, so I'm going to be cutting down at 19. And I'm going to be allowing a 1/2 inch for sewing. So using my pinking shears, I'm going to cut a straight line on my elastic just to help avoid any fraying. My final measurement is going to be 19 and a half, 1/2 inch being my seam allowance. Gonna mark that. Okay, go ahead and cut that. We are now ready to move on to sewing. You should now have something that looks like this. Your bottom skirt, 2 pockets, and your elastic. You're going to want to take a straight pin and taking the portion of your skirt with the pinking sheared edge with your straight pin about 3/4 of an inch. You're going to make sure your placket is neatly lined up and pinned together. With your sewing machine, you're going to be top stitching it 1/8 of an inch just to hold it in place. Your pockets, you're also going to be top stitching 1/8 of an inch using the part with the fold as your guide. Taking your elastic, you're going to fold it in half and using your zigzag stitch, you're going to stitch it down 1/4 of an inch. Now, if you're new to sewing or just not that comfortable with it, make sure you check out my sewing video, Sewing 101, where I review things such as threading your machine, checking the tension, and basic stitches that I'll be using in today's video. So, let's start sewing. Now that your pockets have been top stitched, you're going to fold down a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides and the bottom. If you're not good at eyeballing, go ahead and take your measuring tape and tailor's chalk and mark out your side seams before pressing. You'll repeat this process on both your pockets before placing them on your skirt. Next, we'll be placing our pockets onto our skirt. Make sure to trim all loose threads. Now, when placing your pockets, what I like to do is I like to make sure that everything is centered between my pocket and my side seam. So placing my pocket, take my measuring tape and make sure I have the same distance on both sides. And using my plaid lines as my guide, I'm going to go ahead and place my pockets on top of those. Move that over a little. Okay. And my measurement from the top to the bottom is going to be about 3.5 inches. Okay, now once your pocket is placed, you're going to be top stitching it with 1/8 of an inch all around. Make sure to pin that into place. And while you're top stitching your pockets, we're also going to be doing a base stitch all around our skirt, 1/4 of an inch. So a base stitch is a wider stitch per inch, and this stitch is going to allow us to create our gather. So make sure you leave a long enough tail at the end of your stitch. Don't back stitch so that the tail is able to pull through the fabric and you're able to create your gathers. Now I'm going to go ahead and place my pocket on the other side of my skirt, and once I have that in place, we can move on to sewing. So now that your pockets are top stitched, you should have something that looks like this. Now, to make your gathers, go ahead and take the tail end of your thread and pull it nice and gently all the way through, bunching up your fabric to create your gathers, just like this. Now, the total circumference of my waist measurement is 20 inches, so my actual garment is going to be measuring 20 inches. So, take my measuring tape, and from side seam to side seam, I'm going to check my back. And this is going to be 10 inches. Neatly hold it and measure it out. It is measuring about 9.5, which means I need to release some of my gathers until I hit 10. I'm just going to double check that. Lying this way. Yep, so I have 9.5. So I'm going to go ahead and release some gathers. I now have 10. So I'm going to do the same thing for the front. However, the front, I'm going to mark the center of my placket, which I want to lay nice and flat. You don't want any gathers there, or else it's going to pucker and it's not going to look so nice. So my center, I'm going to make sure is measuring 5 inches from my center to my side seam. That's 5. Check the other side. 5. Perfect. So now this is ready for our elastic. Now our elastic, you're going to take it with your 1/4 inch seam allowance, fold it over in half, taking your chalk, going to go ahead and mark it just like that. Now bringing that mark to your seam, stretch it out, mark it there on the inside. Repeating the process on the other side. So when you flip it inside out, you should now have something like this. 4 different markings, your side seam being one of them. Turning it inside out again, we're now going to be pinning our elastic to our skirt. Now keep in mind that your elastic should be 1 inch smaller than your actual woven fabric, or skirt fabric, I should say. Okay, so taking our side seam, I'm going to pin that to either one of your side seams. It's up to you which one you want. And your seam allowance on this is going to be 1/4 inch. So this is going to be a little trickier to sew, just because you're going to be sewing this upside down, meaning that your fabric's going to be on the bottom and your elastic's going to be on top, the way it's going to look finished. So you're going to have to gauge this once it's on your sewing machine. So I pinned it. Now taking the other half, pin it to the other side seam, just like this. Sure I catch that. Okay. Now, using my marking in the center, I'm going to match it up to my placket marking. Oh, which I forgot to mention, I do apologize. Your placket, you want to locate the center. So in this case, my placket was measuring 1 inch. I went ahead and just marked it at the 1/2 inch mark. Go ahead and pin that there. Once again, 1/4 inch. Push this one through. It's just a little thicker, so it's going to be a little harder to get it through. Try that one more time. Okay. There we go. Okay. And now my back, pick up my garment, join my side seams. And very gently, because I don't want to pull any of my gathers, take this, match the back. Just going to go ahead and pull it, my nail there, and match it with my yellow marking, just like that. Go ahead and pin that there. You should now have something that looks like this all around. So when you're actually feeding this into the machine, you're going to want your elastic to be on top, just like this. And you're going to top stitch it with the zigzag stitch. And once you get to your gathers, you see how there's a bit of an opening here once it lays flat? Should have more or less a little more of a little flap here. So when you're actually sewing it, you're going to want to pull your elastic so that it lays nice and flat on your fabric. So when you're sewing, you're going to pull the elastic and feed the fabric underneath, just like that. Hope that was clear, but I will be demonstrating once we start sewing. So let's start sewing it. You should now have something that looks like this. Super cute. Now the inside of your garment should look like this. And if the stitching on the inside goes up or it dips a little, it's okay. Don't be so hard on yourself. The style is actually pretty forgiving thanks to all the gathers. Now, we're actually going to be giving this away via Instagram, so make sure you're following us at Tiny Trends LA. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And my name is Sharon. Thank you so much for watching.